Welcome to the Futureproof Leader podcast. I'm Jessica Raypatch, and today we have Dana DeVito, COO of Elite Performance Associates. Dana, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm so excited to talk all things relational leadership. But I'd like to start it off by just you telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, what your mission is.
Yeah, great. Jessica, first, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Dana DeVito, Elite Performance Associates is the company that my business partner Dave and I have. We are leadership development and coaches and consultants. We essentially work with founders, owners, and senior leaderships of small to mid-sized businesses. And we walk them through start to finish, kind of finding them where they're at and what their needs are. And that can be from operations to leadership development to succession planning. Oftentimes, what opens the door for me is helping owners and founders develop that next tier of leaders within their organization so they can start to hand off responsibilities, trust that it will be accomplished well, and then give them some space to continue to scale and grow their businesses.
That sounds absolutely lovely. I was recently asked the question, if you walked away, if you and your co-founders kind of walked away for like a month vacation, how would your business run? And I'm like, I need to have my hands on everything. And they're like,
Oh, yeah.
ooh, bad answer, Jessica. So
That's right.
yeah, I'm excited for this conversation to hear kind of how you do your work. So as I mentioned, the topic relational leadership, building teams that actually work. A lot of the leaders focus on results first and then relationships second. So, from your perspective, what is relational leadership and why is it so critical to building teams that actually perform?
The metrics and the results that we're looking for in an organization are truly our measure of success. And so that's always going to be our scoreboard that we're evaluating the efficacy of our programs. But it's all run by people. And I don't care what industry you're in. And I've been in hospitality, I've been in tech, I've been in everything. And it's always people driven. So highlighting that the people are the most important component of your business. There's a great book called Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. And she says it really well by stating the conversation is the relationship. I've taken that and really thought about it in my own businesses and then the ones that I coach and consult with. And what I realized is that we as senior leaders struggle knowing what kind of relationship we should be having with our staff and with our team members. And so we often, again, we have this overarching desire to be successful, and we can tie financial metrics to it, operational metrics to that. And we often look where the greatest pain points are and try to solve that. And so that influences whom we're talking with and what we're talking about. And to me, it's really reactionary. So I like to reframe it in a proactive manner and start to lay out a system on knowing whom I should be talking to, what type of relationship and conversation I should be having, and purposely driving that for results and performance in our teams.
Proactive is always the best answer. Reactive leadership is such the norm these days. I feel like people are just constantly reacting, proactive leadership isn't really a thing anymore. And I love that you kind of start from the beginning. That's what your
Mhm.
focus is on how to kind of get ahead of that or turn the business around, right? That can't be an easy task though. There is that like disconnect, like you're the CEO, you're the C-suite. Well, how do you connect with your teams? Should you have that close relationship with them, or should it be a very much like, hey, I'm the leader, I'm strategy, I'm objectives, and you're doing the operations, I'm gonna let you run with the show? Like,
Sure.
what do you say about the interaction there?
The issue we have is we don't have a really easy framework in which to know what to be doing with and with whom. And so I created in my own business and working with a couple clients, I created this framework where I have senior leaders start to work with their staff and identify them into one of three categories. And really simply put it, call it the 3P filter, but it's defining your team members as being a partner, a project, or a problem. And everybody falls into one of those categories. And it doesn't define if you should be having a relationship. It just tells you what kind of relationship and then how to do it. And so then we can start to talk about how intimate or close do we need to be, or how far away do we need to distance ourselves, and what type of space that looks like.
I know you have a framework all about it, but is it literally taking every one of your middle managers? Is it like where do you start with identifying the project or
Yeah.
the project?
As I think the military does it really well by defining the fixed amount or the total number of people that we should have as direct reports to us. And that should be no more than six. I've had a business where it was me, three managers, and then about 100 employees underneath that. And there wasn't a lot of stratification to that. And so I was skipping or leapfrogging over my managers and starting to develop relationships with my near 100 employees. And it
Yeah.
was just problematic. So I was too fragmented. I didn't know. And so part of it is evaluating your organizational structure and seeing where you or what you have built already. And if we're too broad, if you've got 30 people underneath you, we need to create a little bit of stratification or hierarchy so that we can better identify time and energy that you're going to be spending with your team. So we'll take a look at that first. And then in each segment, we want to make sure that you've got no more than 3 to 6 direct reports that you're responsible for. And then we start to evaluate at each level the people, again, you're responsible for. Do they fall in as a partner, a project, or a problem?
Now, here's a question for you. I
Sure.
mean, I don't know about you, but when I was in corporate America, when I was in companies, I constantly was going through a reorganization. It
Yeah.
was frustrating because I was always the IT project manager, and they're like, "We're doing another reorg." And I'm like, "Duh,
Yeah,
we
for
have to
sure.
change all the systems."
Yeah.
So, like, do you recommend constant reorganization for to identify like how you, or do you come in, you do like one reorganization if you find that it's like kind of like not structured? I guess it's very, like, apparent. I feel like anywhere I worked, it's like constant reorganization. Is
Yeah.
that a thing? Does that drive change? Does that productivity? Is that actually, like, worth it, or is it not?
And it's tough to answer with a really broad brush, but I'm conservative in significant change, but it has to be reflected in the reality of it. If we have consistent pain points, especially in the org chart where somebody's either got too much responsibility, not enough, or somewhere in the middle, it does behoove us to really go in and evaluate. And so what we do with my clients is once a year, we part of our strategic planning that we're meeting together. We're pulling it all together, evaluating the mechanisms that we put into place, see the efficacy. Did they move the marker or not? Do we need to adjust but really the big broad is usually when I just go into start working with an organization. So we'll take a good look at it, make any real significant changes, and then it's just tweaking. But the big ones, man, I think it's too disruptive.
It
That
is.
frustration's just
It
awful.
goes back to, like, what you were saying, like, understanding, like, the connection between you and your people, because I feel like as a strategic leader, now that I'm sitting in a different seat, running, like, as an entrepreneur, I understand it a little bit more now, like, "Oh, you're constantly trying to, like, optimize, make it more efficient." But then, like, what happens as it trickles down the chain of command, if you will, if we're using a military reference here? It's just, like, that disruptive behavior, like the change management of the org structure, is very frustrating. It causes a lot of disgruntled employees.
It's
Anyway,
it's interesting you bring it up because it is a concept that really prominent right now. I was
no,
I
I
was
love
listening
it.
to a podcast about algorithmic trading because I'm interested to see how AI is impacting the financial markets and what is it doing. And one of the researchers was talking about as they were deploying their trading systems, the more sophisticated and more rule sets they added, the less effective it became. And so they got to this law of diminishing returns where it just started waterfalling in the wrong direction. And so they had to take it back. And so what I liken it to is it's like a subway when you've got pretty close or tight walls to the trains as they're going through versus an interstate where you've got 5 or 6 lanes. You still want boundaries, right? So you want structure. And so you want an organizational structure that will provide some clarity, but you don't want it so constrained that you can't deviate or allow it to have some flexibility in times of duress or even in times of growth. And so I think when we build an organization, we want it to be more like in an interstate where we got 5 or 6 lanes. We all know that we're going north. And then we all know that if I need to go from the slow lane to the fast lane, I can, and then I can come back. And so we want to give some wiggle room in any type of organization based off of ever changing environments. So too much rigidity and too many details is problematic, I think.
So, okay, so there is definitely a stigma out there that, like, if you focus on relationships and in growing those, that you're going to slow things down. So, how do you help leaders balance strong relationship with high performance and accountability?
Yeah. Great question. I think that the benefit that we have by building strong relationship is allowing and getting our high performers to live in a level of excellence and efficiency. And then recognizing that and this goes back to those are my partners. Those are the people that are really capable and competent, good at their position and loyal to the organization and desiring to do well. The projects are those that may not have the skill sets yet, but have the right cultural fit. And so that's the relationship that we really need to nurture to grow them into autonomous competency. And then the problems are, and it's a big topic there, but those are the people that we need to move on from. We need to reintroduce them to industry. And we need to make that decision with certainty and clarity. And to go back to your question is how do we balance it? if we know that we're having the right conversations with the right people and empowering them to be effective, our results start to grow. The durability in the organization starts to grow. Our retention starts to grow. And so as an owner or senior leadership, we now, instead of feeling like we're holding everything together, like your statement of I can't go away for a month,
Yep.
I can let it go. I just get out of the way and they perform better without me than they do with me. And that's kind of, we got to get a little bit out of our own ego, myself included, right? I love being Superman. I want to have my
Oh,
cape
yeah.
and tights on and fly in and save the day and guide and lead the ship. But really, I'm most effective when I empower, not enable, when I empower people around me to reach their very best. I love sports analogies. My son plays collegiate soccer, and I've watching him go through the ranks in soccer. The game is always flowing. And like in business, the game is always flowing. And so you can't coach, in the 67th minute of the game. You got to give them freedom to run. In the practice is in the relationship and the stuff we do off the game day field. And so that goes back to what types of relationship, how much time and energy should you invest. That's defined on who the person is, where, if they're a partner, problem, or project, and then how are you following up with them and making sure that they're achieving the results that you expect of them, that they're desiring, and then that the organization is demanding of them.
I guess the goal is to have a lot of partners.
Yes,
And like that would be the dream, to have like a ton
for
of
sure.
partners. Then you can empower them, say, hey, listen to the mission, you go do it. I don't care how you do it. This is what we're going to achieve. Like that's
Mhm.
the ultimate. I would love that.
Yeah.
The project. So how many projects should be handled at a time? How
Yeah.
many?
Yeah. This is the painful spot. New to medium term tenure as a leader, you can have one or two,
Okay.
and that's a really hard thing to manage. But again, we're kind of layering this. If you're only responsible between 3 and 6 people,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
just a percentage of what you've got rather than I've got to work on.
Right.
And so the most experience, I've been doing this for a long time. I cap out at about three, maybe. And one of the characteristics I qualify as a project is you've got to be willing to go where they're at. I think I may have shared the story before as we were prepping for this, but it's like teaching your child to tie their shoe.
Yeah.
You've got to go where they're at. You've got to get on your hands and knees, look at them eye to eye, belly to belly, show them how it's done, and then release them into the wild, fully expecting that they're going to mess it all up and not remember how to tie their shoe. And so there's a comeback. You're not frustrated, you're not angry. It's just part of the process.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to let my kids out of the door when they were 18 until I knew how to tie their shoes. So
Of
that was
course.
a goal of mine, right? I laugh about it, but there's an honesty to that. If you've got a project, are you committed in that manner?
Right.
Because as adults, and I still fall in this problem, as adults, I look at another adult and I say, hey, I'm going to tell you once and I expect you to go figure the rest of it out.
Yeah.
And when they come back, I'm like, I told you once. Why did you do it? Come on.
Yep. Yep.
And so I have to consistently remind myself that, and this is one of the hardest things as with this framework, is reminding myself, you know what? I'm in the teaching them to tie their shoe phase. I need to go where they're at. I need to be patient, kind, and gracious with them while holding them to standards of excellence with clear expectation. But I need to go where they're at.
This is the hardest, I would say. Like project, yes, like you got to identify how much can you handle, right? The problems, I meet leaders that are like, oh, I move on. It's not a big deal. You have the car conversation or whatever, you move on.
Mhm,
That's rare to find a leader like that. Usually it's like you want to give people an opportunity and chance.
mhm,
What you do the performance evaluation, and then that goes on for 6 months, and then you move them departments. They still fail there, and then they move departments, and you still have kind of like this. It's just not a good fit. So, where do you go? You walk into an organization, you see a handful, maybe problems. So, how do you coach a CEO or a C-suite to kind of deal with that pretty abruptly, or do you?
I'm never encouraging people to cut their nose off to spite their face. Alternatively, transferring between departments is just taking that same problem and you're shuffling. It's a shell game. And so
Yeah,
really push back hard against that. First of all, we need to understand, what does it mean to be a problem? What characteristics do they exemplify or show? And then once we've identified them as a problem, it is our role and task to move on from this. So we start to, again, provide this very clear framework and give words and language to something that we've often danced around and avoided. We have this commonality of language, like what does a project or a problem mean? And to me, it's somebody who's underperforming consistently, that have or miss on the cultural standards that we expect of a person in the organization. One thing that I highlight is the variability of their performance is problematic. If they're good one month and they're bad the next month and they're good again and they're bad again, well, that inconsistency really adds credence to them being a problem. So once a problem, always a problem within an organization. And this is not a condemnation of anybody. It's not a critique of their character. It just means that they're not a good fit for the organization. So once we identify them as a problem, we set in plans to move on from them. So we're either interviewing and hiring for the replacement or eliminating the position, rotating staff around, whatever it is to fill that gap that they will have when we ask them to leave. The caveat to all of this is, we talked about projects and the time commitment, and you can only have 1, 2, maybe 3 at the very most. If you have a fourth, you don't have the time, energy, or effort to be able to pour into them. They fall to the problem category, and that's not on them, that's on us. And so this is the burden of leadership and why, some of the hardest conversations I've had is we love the individual, we see the potential in them, but they are lower on the list than the
Mhm.
rest of our priorities,
Yep.
and that's on me. And so I've sat in with a lot of owners and founders that have struggled to do termination with people that they started their businesses with and leaned on for years, but were problematic for a number of different reasons, and sat in with them and helped them walk through the termination process, like in the room, talking with the individual,
Oh,
and it's
that's support right there.
for sure, yeah.
That's first level support. No, it's well, it's hard, but I feel like people also like will respect leaders that can do that. Being that middle manager, the IT project manager, kind of working in that space, those problem people, those people who like either whether it's not a personality thing, it's just a performance thing, or whether it's a personality thing and not a performance thing, the way it affects the culture of the team is uncanny. And when you see this person still on the team 6 months, they have a 6-month review and then they're moving departments. Well, guess
Oh,
what? You have to integrate with that department or you have to collaborate with that department. It's like it really does bring the culture down of,
sure.
and it really deters from the mission. Now, are people focused on their job? Are they going to want to work with a team member who's not contributing or doing half the work but getting paid the same amount?
Oh, yeah.
This is such a point of contention, and I actually can honestly say I've never worked for a corporation that had, I wanna say, the balls to, like, make the move in the team, and it has definitely taken away from performance optimization. It it's
Oh, yeah.
driven away really high performing people because they're like, "I don't get paid enough to deal with this. I'm working my butt off. I don't wanna be on a team with someone like this. I'm gonna find somewhere else." So not only is it a problem, for the organization as a whole, is like it's really affecting retention of those
Oh,
high
yeah.
performers when you don't deal with those problems. What I hear for some of the people on the podcast that come on is like, if you can identify those problems, the sooner the better to start like mitigating it up front, like that's the key. But I'm assuming you don't always walk in to an environment where it's, hey, just starting to be a problem. Let's start taking care of it. It's usually like, hey, this guy's been working here for 2 years. No one's been really doing anything about it. And then
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to kind of phase it out.
Say we have 40 employees, they'll have one partner, 37 projects, and and two problems. You're like, all right, we got to figure this out a little bit. And so it's
Yeah.
tough conversations.
Yeah.
Going back to the partners, one thing that we often give them such freedom and leeway because they're so capable, but they tend to shoulder the burden. And just like you highlighted, they'll take on the responsibilities or fill in the gaps of those that are acting as a problem. And so, again, informing me as a leader, I've got a partner. I need to protect that individual.
Yeah.
I need to empower them, give them opportunity, but make sure that they're safe in their environment without taking on. So I've got to talk with them, not just how are you doing, but hey, what's burdening right now? What are you taking on that you shouldn't be? What is it? And so I'm getting a clearer picture of what is going on in the department or the organization. But that means that we're going to have some really hard conversations,
Oh,
right?
yep.
Because that person that's been shuffled around, I've never wanted to say they're a problem, so we're just gonna move them.
Yep.
And I love asking, the leader, "If you're replaced today, would your replacement hire that person?"
Who? Good question.
And it frames it differently because they're like, "Well," 9 times out of 10, they're like, "So, all right,
Yeah.
I'm clear now. We gotta
Well,
go."
I think, and I don't know if you run into this, but like I've also heard feedback like, well, the thing is like we didn't do enough data on this person. Well, we don't have enough proof that they're not a performer. So what is that going to look like with a legal team when we let go of somebody? Like, what is the implications of this? Well, they sue us. So we just moved departments because maybe that was just the wrong job for them. But really, all the signs are there that it's just not a good fit for the organization as a whole. Then they get shuffled and then there's problems elsewhere. Well, now you're spreading the disease essentially. What would you say to a CEO who's like, "Well, what about the legal implications of those problem
Yeah,
children?" Like, do you take it on?
for sure. Well, I'm not an attorney, so I can't give
Well,
legal
right,
legal
right.
advice as far as that goes.
Yep.
And so that's something we qualify, and every state is different.
Okay.
Arizona, we've got a lot of freedom in how we handle that. But, I work with clients around the country. And so we want to make sure that we're adhering to it. And the first thing I would say is, part of this issue stems from avoidance.
Oh, yeah.
And nature loves to fill a vacuum, and it's usually with the negative. And so when we have a problem that we're recognized but aren't addressing, a lot of negativity gets filled in that because we just avoid it.
Yeah.
And so what again, this is a relational based thing. We got to go in and lean into this and start talking about how our expectations were you understanding of what was expected of you in this position? Are you meeting these standards and expectations? How are we providing support for you, and how are you not meeting these? So it's a really open and candid conversation without we don't I hate getting stuck in the past. Like, you've done this, you're bad at that, you're not going. What I like saying is, okay, where are we at today? What do I expect tomorrow? And the past informs me, but it doesn't define the conversation. So if I've got a problem, this is how we're careful legally. I'm not trying to prove them wrong.
Right.
What I want to say is, hey, how are you going to be successful tomorrow? And if you can't be successful tomorrow, then we need to change positions. Then we need to move you out of the organization, right? Most of the time when I see legal issues arise, it's because CEOs and leadership start to focus on what somebody's done wrong a year ago, 6 months ago,
Ah,
last month. And so
yep.
now it's a debate. Now it's a personal attack. Now he hates me. Now she doesn't like what I do. She's
Right.
always had it out for me. And so just avoid all that and start looking, okay, well, that's a data collection issue. I don't need to worry about that because I'm worried about what's happening on Thursday, on Friday, on Monday of next week. And that reframes it, but it also enforces that I got to be having those conversations moving forward with that individual. I can't avoid it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good way to look at it because I think you're right. I don't have any evidence. I don't have any of that stuff. But yeah, if you say, "What do you do?" Well, what's the objectives this week? And they
Yeah.
can't carry that out. And we've hired a professional. We hired Dana to come in to make an assessment. It becomes quite obvious, what's going on. Just talking to the team too.
Yeah.
I remember those days and I don't miss them, I'll tell you that. So, this is leadership in AI as well. So, I got to ask you an
Yeah.
AI question, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as AI and automation kind of come more integrated into organizations and teams, how do you see relational leadership evolving when more communication and workflows are kind of supported by technology?
Sure. You know, I can't get too predictive on where AI is going to be, but I do know as the industries that I'm working with all start to integrate it better. Even if we're eliminating roles and positions, although I haven't seen huge swaths of that, I've seen some, but not huge. There's still personnel that are involved in it and that are making sure and navigating either the results or the input. There's three phases, right? It's input, processing, and output, and so there's always a hand involved somewhere in that phase or in one of those phases, and making sure things are communicated well, reviewed well, and then articulated well are is critical. And so it goes back to relationship. I've got to be in conversation with people. I've got to be engaging over and over, asking really good questions, being curious. And so as AI is doing that, I mean, I think our curiosity needs to rise, not diminish. Back in the day, back in business school, somebody said as we progress through the ranks, we need to trust but verify. And I think the same thing is true with AI. We need to ask questions. We need to be curious. We need to understand what's going on, not just assume it's going. And my belief is will be a truism for the rest of my career, at least.
I think that you've hit it spot on. I couldn't agree more. Now, we covered a lot of topics today, and it seems
Yeah.
like you handle quite a bit for a company. So, where can people find you if they're looking for services like this?
Yeah, great question. Thanks. Two places on our website. It's eliteperformanceassociates.com. And then I can be found on LinkedIn at Dana DeVito.
I would think I would hire you just to come help me mitigate what is a problem? What is a I love that you categorize it because honestly, it sounds so simple, but I think that's just such a deficiency that we're not able to. I love the idea of like building as many partners as we can, taking on a couple projects because I feel like it helps not only the person grow, but the leader grow as well with patience, direction, kind of really investing yourself to empower someone. I love it. And then of course dealing with the issues that you don't want to deal with. Nobody wants to do that. Why would you want to do that? So thank you for your time. I loved your feedback. I love learning about what you do. And until next time, I hope you have an awesome day. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Futureproof Leader.